There we go. We are now live. Hello, everyone who is watching live or who is watching back. I'm joined by the lovely Bryan Wilson, who will be talking to us about his recent release, which is part of an ongoing series, but also just the series as a whole. And I'll ask questions about yourself and everything. So first off, Bryan, do you want to introduce yourself and do a bit of a spiel?
Sure. First, thanks for having me. And yeah, my name is Bryan Wilson. I'm the author of the Power of the Stars series. It's basically, I always market it as a science fantasy space opera. It's a 50-50 genre blend of sci-fi and fantasy. I've always very much loved both genres, and it was my goal to write a story that I like to think is very much equal, 50-50, both of those two, sci-fi and fantasy. The books themselves, the first one has been likened to as Ender's Game meets Star Wars. I think that holds. Other readers have called the series in general Wheel of Time and Space, which when I got that, I was very happy because Wheel of Time is my favorite series, and it has definitely inspired these books. I also like to think there are Red Rising vibes in there. I love the show Band of Brothers. The newer book definitely has the vibes of that in there. And yeah, it's basically a little breakdown of the story, or at least the first book. It starts off, it follows a group of young guys. That's at least how it starts on Earth, our contemporary world, and they get caught up in what is really the arrival of an alien fleet onto the planet. I don't want to say it's an invasion because it's not, but there is an attack that occurs. Our characters get caught up in it. And when that happens, they come to learn that this army that has arrived is actually human. And there are many other worlds where humans live upon. And these societies have purposefully kept Earth in the dark for millennia. They've known of our existence, but haven't made us aware of theirs. There's a reason behind that. One of the main ones is the magic system in my books. It's called Solera. It's the power of the stars is what I call it. And it's basically everyone on these other worlds have it. It's kind of a connection to the soul, star magic. And because everyone has it, it just powers these societies. It's ingrained into their technology, into their weaponry, basically into everything they do. And it can't be grasped on Earth. We don't really know why at the start of the story. That's the big mystery. But that is a big reason why Earth was left in the dark and why it is called the Forsaken Planet to many of these other worlds. And then basically it's just there's a power struggle going on out with these other worlds, and two of them have kind of come to a head, and that is what has led them to finally reveal themselves to Earth and now kind of pin Earth in the center of what is this potential universal war. And that is really what launches our characters off and starts the ball rolling.
Fantastic. That's a really good sum up. So first book is, of course, The Forsaken Planet. I have a copy here, which actually you very kindly sent me, which I am terrible. I have not read it yet, but I am very excited to. I think a big problem for me personally is that I'm just not reading at the minute. I've got a lot. We've all got a lot on. That's besides the point.
Yeah, absolutely. Believe me, I'm the same way. I'm 3 ARCs deep right now.
Wow.
Of being behind that I was supposed to have read up to this point. So
yeah, it can be a lot, but it's obviously your premise sounds amazing. Currently, we are 2 books published, with the third one coming on the 20th of May. That's correct, I believe.
Yeah, well, there's 3 books published, but two in the main series, then one is a novella. That's part of the series. It works well as a standalone, but it also, I think, will heighten the experience of especially book 3 that's coming out of the main series if you read the novella before that.
Okay, so that's your preferred way to read it?
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Good to know. That's good. Obviously, like I've just said, we've got obviously 3 books, published, one coming on the 20th of May. Do you foresee how many books are coming in this series? Is this going to be the final main part to this story, or have you got more coming?
I am my goal is to write it in 5 books.
Okay.
That's kind of been my goal from day one. As I've gotten a little further in the series, I got a little worried. I don't know if I could finish it in 5, but I got a lot. I got through 3 well. I was worried I might have to move some things from that into others, but no, I got through 3 well. I've outlined pretty much the majority of book 4, and
Wow.
so I think it's going to be tight. It'll be a long book if I can get it all done in 5, but my books are pretty chunky anyways. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
one coming out, and you can see
Yeah, this one's quite chunky already.
this one's almost 600 pages, so in print.
Yeah, that's the
So
same for this one, 581.
yeah, that's Forsaken Planet. Still the longest one, but this one was only about, I think it was like 8,000 words less. Um, but yeah, so I'm hoping 5. I think I'll be able to do it in 5, and that's definitely the goal.
Okay, so it's going to be quite a long series, which is good for the people that like a longer series. I personally do love a long series. I
Mhm.
think something that's quite popular at the minute for both trad and indie is the trilogy. But I
Yeah.
do love being able to sink my teeth into a longer series. Definitely, you've got a yo here,
Oh, what's up, man?
and who's that Brian kid?
Yeah, yeah. No, that feels good to hear. Wow, I got that one.
So you've just mentioned that you have got the next book planned out. Would you say that in general you are a planner? Like, do you know where the whole series is going? How has your writing process been for this series?
So when I started book 1 was very much just kind of a hobby thing. I mean, the book took me 20 years to complete from the second I started it
Oh,
to the
wow.
moment I published it.
Mhm.
And it was very much just a hobby thing. I was never sure I was going to publish it. I planned that book out heavily, went
Mhm.
with it, and I had all these ideas for the deeper story. But I was more just having fun with it when I wrote the majority of book 1. But as time went on, and after I finished that first draft. There was a big gap between me finishing that draft,
Mhm.
and then it was a 10+ year gap between finishing the draft and getting the thing published. And in that time, the story just always sat in my head, and that is when I started to come up with a lot of the ideas for where we're going to go from there for book 2, book 3, book 4. um, so I've definitely been a planner in that sense. Before I write any book, I heavily outline where it's going. I don't hit every single little minute point, but all
Mhm.
the major points are going to be hit. All the character arcs, their progressions, they're going to basically be in there in the outline, because I want to know. I want to know in chapter 1 if I'm trying to get somewhere for a character by chapter 20. I'm going to
Mhm.
start putting in those little pieces. That just helps me for their however many chapters to get to that point. It helps me to throw a little bit of that growth here, 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 and it just keeps growing to reach that next point. And that's just how my system works. I know some people, they feel they're better off just kind of learning and going with their characters as they write them, and that's something I
Yeah.
can't understand, but I have respect for it because it works obviously for a lot of writers. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting how some people can just pants it is the phrase, I suppose,
yeah.
and they can just sit down at a computer, sit down with pen and paper, and write and see where it goes.
Hmm.
That's not me. Not that I write books, but like in general, I am a planner through and through. I have to plan things to know where I'm going, so that makes so much more sense to me.
Yeah.
In obviously the process of the first book, it taking you so long as it being a hobby book, do you feel like a lot of things have changed in your process, or is it kind of still the same in the sense that obviously it's taken you so long to write the first book, but you've published quite a few books in the past few years, so it must have condensed a little bit.
Oh, 100%. I mean, my process, I've had so many people when my first book came out, what's your process? What's this? And I'm like,
I don't
I
know.
don't even want to call it a process, because it was just, like I said, it was a hobby. So it was
Yeah.
touch it here, touch it there as I go. I mean, I spent about 5 years on and off working on the first draft, and I never looked at the thing for like 2, 3 years.
Hmm.
And I did a heavy set of self-editing, kind of taught myself with tutorials and stuff. I never took classes or anything. And
Hmm.
again, that was over a span of maybe a couple years, just working on a little bit here, a little bit there. And then I want to say like a year went by, and then that's when I I got the cover for it. Because that was when I really started. It was in my later 20s. I really started saying, all right, you know what, I want to publish this. want to make the effort. I think I have a desire for it to be a little more than the hobby. I want to see, I think it's a good story. I want to see what people think. But then I met my wife, I got married, we had kids, life,
Yeah, a lot of things take a back burner at that point.
Exactly. So that was the longest stretch it went without me touching it. I think it was 5 or 6 years. And then just I run a business outside of writing, and that slowed down a little bit in the back end of 2022. And so when that happened, the book, it's always been in my head. Like I said, I finished the first draft, which is the story of book one, so long ago that I've had further inspirations and ideas for over a 10-year stretch that were popping in my head for books 2, book 3, and so on. And yeah, so it came back into my head. I slowed down a little bit. I actually had a moment to breathe for what felt like the first time in a few years. And I said, I want to read that again. I haven't read it in so long. And I sat down, I read it, and it had been so long, it felt like I was reading someone else's work. It almost didn't feel like I wrote it. So I felt like that was a little bit of a surreal experience. And it was the moment that I was like, I really, 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 I'm going to bunker down. I'm going to get this out there now. I want to get it out there. I enjoy it. I was very aware at the time I'm biased, so it could possibly be a major flop with everyone else. Maybe I'm the only nerd who likes this story, but I made the decision that I was going to go ahead and do that. And so I bunkered down hardcore. I hired an editor. I hired a couple because I didn't have any connections in like the indie sphere and the book socials world. So I didn't know how to go and get people who could help do beta reading and stuff like that for free. My process now, I have people who, I don't have to pay, but at that time I was paying to do it.
Yeah.
And which I actually think helped because, if you find the right people, yes, a lot of people think you shouldn't have to pay for beta reading, but I got ones who did an absolutely phenomenal job. And I don't think there's any doubt they bettered my story, giving detailed reports, highly detailed comments and the things. And, they were people who obviously took it seriously. They were getting paid. So they kind of took it to the next level of a lot of the beta readers I've used since who do it for free, which is fine. You do something for free, you do it to your own standards. But
well, there's plus and minuses to both ways, I suppose. Like, obviously, like you said, if you're coming into this space and you don't know anyone, paying for someone, at least there's almost, it depends, as long as they're honorable people, in theory, there's a standard to be held to. And then once you've got your book out there and you found your fans and you found people that also love the story as much as you do, then you can rely on people that are trying, that their hearts are in the right place to better your story as well.
Exactly.
But you got to find those people first.
Yeah, no, of course. And that's perfectly said. I would almost advise to anyone who's thinking of getting their first book out there, I would almost advise go pay for beta readers because you got to do your research though. Yeah. I didn't just find anyone online. I went on Fiverr and they're people leaving reviews on there. You do your homework on there and you're going to find people who do an actual pretty good job. Yeah. And that's what I did. My top beta reader. Actually, no, I didn't get him on Fiverr. I found him on Goodreads actually. But he was a paid one. There's people who post paid openings on Goodreads too. And I just got lucky. I took a chance on him and he's by far like my favorite. He's been there since day one and he's one I don't think I could write a book without using now. That's nice. But yeah, so, I went through the process of book one and then I bunkered down, got everything done and I cleaned it all up and I finally published it in 2023, June of that year. And what happened there was when I published it, I had a plan going in and I'd sent a lot of physical copies out of the book. That was kind of my introduction to the social sphere. It's how I kind of got my footing on there. Yeah. And I also ran a bunch of discount sites at the first week my book was out. I discounted it. I did some ads on discount sites and that I ended up with like almost 3,000 downloads. So that was a big help of giving my book an early push and also getting it the almighty reviews and ratings and all that stuff, which makes it seem a little more legit to, I'm coming on the scene. No one knows who I am. So if I'm showing them a book and it's got 3 reviews, they're going to be like, no, thanks, even if maybe the premise is nice. So to get those reviews, that was a big help too. Yeah. And, but yeah, what happened was people seemed to enjoy the story. I mean, obviously not everyone. It's going to work for some. It's going to not work for others, but it seemed like the majority of people who were reading it really liked it. And, I was getting DMs, I was getting emails. some of the best things was, getting emails on just my website. People obviously
Mhm.
liked it enough to go check my website out and then go to my email contact form and be like, hey, when do you think book 2 will be out? Or, hey, just
Yeah.
reaching out with questions, stuff like that. And that just gave me a kick in the butt to start writing book 2 and make sure it wasn't another 20 years before that one came out. And that's what I did. I had those ideas flowing there. So they were already there and it just felt like it was ready to go. And so I was able to push that book out and do the whole process in less than a year. I got it out the following April. And from there, once book 2 came out, that was really when I fine-tuned my process. It got a little more clean and better for book 3, but that was when I learned an actual real author's process, I think, was book 2.
Yeah.
At that point when book 2 came out, that point I'd finally established a little bit of a pretty good footing in the social spheres and all that
Mhm.
stuff. And I'd realized the benefits of different ways of marketing and whatnot. And so that's why from there I went, and then a couple more months later, I got the novella out there, which I offer for free to people who, if they sign up for my newsletter. So I felt like that was a win-win. It's a
Mhm.
nice little shorter sample because my books are chunky. So it's a shorter sample of my work that they
Mhm.
can get a taste of, that they don't have to have read the other books.
Yeah.
And yeah, on top of that, it's free. So it can also hopefully get me some newsletter subscribers, which they say for authors, that's one of the top things you should be doing is having a newsletter, because we've all seen on these socials. I mean, I've gotten a pretty good following on, say, Bookstagram, and
Mhm.
some pretty loyal people who stay active and engage with my stuff. But even over there, I'm 2 weeks out, or like last week, I'm 2 weeks out from my release. Normally, I
Mhm.
post stuff and it's getting a certain number of views, say 1,200 views,
Yeah.
something like that. All of a sudden, last week, I was in like Instagram jail. I don't know what I did. I didn't do anything different from the rest, but it was like my posts were getting half their regular views. My stories were getting like 20% of the normal views they get. And so it's stuff like that, I never want to be fully reliant on these social
Yeah.
networks, because it's out of your control, a lot of it, of what goes on
Mm.
there.
And I think people forget how much marketing an indie author has to do, because obviously it's essentially just you. You are
Yeah,
your publisher, you are your social media manager and everything.
100%.
So it's just remembering like how much stuff. And obviously you've previously said to me off live that this is not your full-time thing, which is completely fine, and it's the same for a lot of indie authors. So not only are you juggling like your home life and your work life, you then have to remember to post or schedule the posts and get the contents out
Yeah.
to actually get the uplift for your next book. It's a lot.
It's a ton. I mean, it could be a full-time job just trying to
Yes.
do that. Just that's why, most of the people, if they make it big in the indie sphere, I know a couple who they're hiring people
Yeah.
to take care of all that stuff for them,
Yeah.
to come up with the ideas for social media content
Mhm.
and help create it and help schedule it and post it.
Yeah,
Because
it is a lot.
it's all algorithm related. I would say the top thing of being an indie author is battling against algorithms. If it's not the Amazon algorithm to try and get your book sold on there,
Yeah.
it's any social media. It's TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. All those algorithms to just
Yeah.
try and get the exposure. It's a
And
lot.
there's so many platforms now as well. Like how, see, I don't know if you do, but how do you choose which one you work on? Because as I don't know, a content creator, I suppose I do make content and I put it on the internet. It's really difficult to like pick which one you want to do and where you want to put stuff. I can imagine that that's quite hard for yourself as well, because you don't want it to get repetitive. You don't want to be posting the same thing across everywhere, but at the same time you want to get views, because there are different people on different
Oh,
platforms.
100%.
Do
100%.
you choose like which platform you work on? Is Bookstagram your predominant platform?
I would say that's my predominant, and that is just because, when I first started, the naive fool that I was getting into indie, I never used social media barely ever before publishing. And
Yeah.
so in my head, I was just like, I knew I was going to have to use it, but I was like, I'm just going to use a couple and that'll get a foundation and that'll be enough. And it's like, no, any indie authors who are blowing up now, they're basically on everything. you try your best. I think you pick your two that you give your most focus to. That would be my recommendation, but you got to try and post a little bit here, a little bit there. I said I'd never go on TikTok just because it's just, I'm 39 years old. I feel like the old man when I'm on there, but and I don't really get a lot of the stuff I see on there, but there's just, that is probably the largest book community, to be honest with you, is
I
on.
feel like Book Talk is a little bit more hype focused. I don't feel like there's a consistent, I haven't found a consistent creator that talks about a lot of different things on Book Talk. And I'm
Yeah,
sure I'm like, it's a whole platform, and I have probably just about scratched the surface. But I feel like the algorithm just serves you the same, as it does everywhere, but it just serves you the same stuff. So like at the minute, it's all about the recent release of a book called Silver Elite, and it's just got everyone arguing over whether it's good or whether it's bad or whatever. But that's all you get, and then you lose the creators that are talking about new indie books or things that are less frequently spoken about. And as content creators, obviously they follow the trends, so they know that if they talk about X, then they're gonna get views because it's going to be picked up by the algorithm. And this is why I love YouTube, because YouTube I can consistently rely on YouTube to bring me new releases and new books and new authors that I haven't necessarily heard of, because it's longer form content. It's not all that snapshot stuff. I love long content. Just taking a video on, and maybe that is the part millennial in me as someone who's 28 and like in the middle of two generational groups. I love having like a long content video on and be like, oh, okay, really, I want to check that book out because you've spoken about it for longer than 30 seconds.
Yeah, no, and I'm the same exact way. I think everything you said is valid. I've made videos on my own things that are just like, everyone stop talking about the same stuff. It's boring. And I'm not just saying that as talk about my books. Like, I don't care. Don't talk about my books. But there's so many great authors out there that are just getting no recognition on these sites while everyone talks about like the same 20 books or whatever it is. And unfortunately, though, they're doing that because it's algorithm based. TikTok especially is definitely, from what I'm learning, I've only been on there a short time. It's more algorithm based than any of the other ones. So that's the thing. People are only going to talk about, it's going to be less depth, more face value. It's only, people are going to talk about what's going to get their video shown, and that is talking about what everyone else is talking about. I agree with you. It's boring. I don't like it. Maybe that is a millennial thing. I don't know. And again, I'm not saying that as someone who it's like, oh, there's jealousy. It's not my book. I'm indie. I know my book's probably not going to get talked about that much, but it's just, there's also a lot of other great, well-established books that just do not get touched on there. And it's definitely a little bit frustrating, but, and I don't think I answered your question before. Yes. Bookstagram was the first one I went on. That's the first outlet I definitely gave my, focus to. And the only reason for that was really the only one I had used all that much before starting publishing socials. And what I did like about Bookstagram, at least how I built it, I still don't really know. I guess I got lucky a little bit because I never knew the algorithm's rules. I never tried to feed the algorithm, but
I don't think anyone knows the rules.
Yeah, I know. Well, there's some indie authors who, I'll tell you, it seems like they got the inside track of what the rules and the trends and all that are, because they do very well on these platforms selling books. But that's because they always seem to be the first to hit what's the trend that's gonna, what we were just talking about before, that face value stuff that's gonna, if they post the content like it, they'll get their stuff out there. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to just kind of post. I wasn't like looking at what the popular videos were. I just posted stuff that I thought was kind of good for my book. Also stuff that I kind of liked as a reader and whatnot. And over time, it took a little bit of time. It took like a year plus, but over time I built a pretty established foundation of people I've connected with as fellow readers, people I've connected with as fellow writers, and most importantly, people who read and enjoyed my story and I was able to connect with. And that's definitely been my biggest building piece, was there in the Bookstagram community, that that's definitely the biggest one that hypes my books around to others that may not necessarily see it. But other than that, then I also tried Twitter when it was still called Twitter. But I never liked Twitter before doing any of this, and I didn't like it when I first got on. I remember I was on for like a month, and I was everything was okay. I was trying to do the thing, and then I remember there was just one of the first big book blow-ups. I'm sure you've seen. It seems every month there's
always drama over there, I swear, and it's I'm not a fan of it since it's changed its name. I don't think it's because it's changed its name, don't get me wrong, but it seems like ever since it's been taken over, given a facelift or whatever, that it's not a positive place anymore.
Yeah.
Which is rubbish. Sorry. You can hear that. The joys of having everything connected. But yeah, since it's done that, it seems like a really negative place. It's not necessarily a nice place to be. I'm still on it. I tweet every now and again, or I post, I suppose. Now it's not about a bird. And I promote when I'm doing lives like this, but otherwise I kind of stay away from it. It's not a happy place to be, which is sad because it used to be a really good community.
Yeah. I think there is still good there. I've stayed on it. I've still been able to make connections on there. I think honestly, I think the majority of the people who are in the bookish world that are on there, I think they're there for the right reasons. I think they want to build community. They want to, like all of us authors, we're trying to grow our brand. Unfortunately, I personally think it's always been on Twitter/X because, what I'm talking about when I first got on there, that was before the new rules and all that stuff. And I was still seeing the people gathering up and bullying others and doing this and doing that. And that's the stuff that just has always kind of bothered me about it. Why I think I've never fully dove in over there. And it is, granted, it does seem like it's getting worse nowadays. And I don't know, it's probably just the algorithm there. And that's kind of what's unfortunate is, again, I do feel like the majority of people over there are there for the right reasons. And we all just want to kind of build community, talk books, and do that. Unfortunately, maybe it always did. Maybe it does more so now. I think X's algorithm is now pushing those who are kind of making the more the tweets that are going to get people riled up and are going to get the more reactions and all that stuff. Cause you're definitely seeing it more and more in it. And it just kind of sucks, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it might be more the fact that obviously people interact with it, whether it's right or wrong, to argue the point, defend the point, and that is what pushes it up because it's seeing people engage with it. Yeah. Maybe I didn't used to see it so much before the change because of maybe who I was following. I'm not a massive, person anywhere really.
No, neither am I.
I think that the community and the people that I found on Instagram is definitely a lot nicer. I am finding some really cool people on TikTok, which is quite nice. As someone that is not a big TikTok user, although it does seem to drain an awful lot of my time. I'm not proud to say. But there are some really cool people over there, and I like the conversations that are being had as well for certain things, not for everything, but that's the same. It's the same for anything. But obviously going back to talking about you and not TikTok, what are some of the inspirations that, obviously you've already mentioned like Star Wars and stuff, that made you write The Forsaken Planet, but maybe are they this, sorry, I'm buffering. Are they the same inspirations that got you to write in general, or was it something else? How did your writing career start?
Well, I always say my writing career definitely started when my reading hobby started. I read The Hobbit when I was 12 years old, and it was the first book I could not put down. I read it in a weekend. I was obsessed with it, and that is what launched me into just my love of fantasy, sci-fi, all of that. And as I got older, into my later teens, and I was reading more and more, I just got this desire to write. I always kind of felt like I just had a big imagination. When I play with my toys when I was a kid, it wouldn't just be smashing them together. It was this grand epic story I would create with action figures and stuff. And so it just felt natural to me that I was reading these stories. I was loving it. It was my getaway. It was kind of, you're flying away to a different world, a different universe.
Mm.
And I just wanted to be able to do that myself. I read a lot of stories, and I kind of, in many cases, saw where they were going even before I got to certain points. And so it just always kind of felt natural to me that I could probably do this if I really put my heart to it.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've always been I've been a predominant epic fantasy reader, so I've always loved everything epic fantasy. But I've always also had a deep, deep love for space, the mysteries of outer space, kind of the things we don't know out there. I just look out there, and it's we know we think we're such a smart species, and we know you look out there, and it makes you realize how little we understand about the universe that we're living in and inhabiting
Yeah.
right now. And so it was just always kind of a cool idea for me to kind of take my love of epic fantasy and kind of mesh that into a space story, and kind of maybe give some answers, obviously fictional, just from my brain, but give my own little answers to some of these mysteries. What's going on out there? What are maybe some of these things we don't understand?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of connect it to perhaps make sense to the mysteries of our own planet, that we're almost like a species with amnesia. We don't even know where we have no records of what past 12,000, 15,000 years ago. So it's, kind of give a little, again, fictional out of my brain, little history to all that. So I just thought that was a cool, fun idea. And that was where it all inspired from. And just in terms of actual like books or popular things that got me into there, yes, Star Wars, Ender's Game was a very big one. When I read that book, it just blew my mind as a teenager. And I said I wanted to have kind of like simulations like that in my training and in my story and all that. Wheel of Time's been my favorite fantasy series. I very much influences my work. And as time has gone on, there's been things like Band of Brothers, like I said, Red Rising, all that stuff. I feel like I've taken a little bit of all of it and kind of put it into my work. Even Harry Potter, I was thinking about this back in, what was 20 years ago, the early 2000s. So right, or maybe even earlier than that. And at that time, Harry Potter was the massive book series. And so I was thinking in my head, what makes Harry Potter, besides being what I think is a well-written series, what makes it stand out so much? Why is it so popular? And to me, a big part of that was how it was connected to our planet, to us. It's almost like it's a story set in the background of our world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, what if? Who am I to say that's not going on back there? So I wanted an idea like that, and that's why I took this whole idea I had and connected it to our contemporary world, into contemporary times, because I do think that opens up the door to higher readership.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I've apparently never thought that in depth about Harry Potter, but that does make sense. The idea, because obviously for that series in particular, you always have the joke when you're a kid, or if you read it when you're a kid, of when am I going to get my Hogwarts letter, which is a really cool thing to think about, especially when we're talking about your book, The Forsaken Planet.
Yeah.
How you mentioned at the start, like apparently Earth is left out because Earth is not as civilized or as forward thinking as the rest of the universe, and I actually can see that as being a real thing.
And that was definitely a plan going into mine. That's why I call Earth the Forsaken Planet, because that has multiple meanings around that. And it's I don't want to say it's necessarily these other worlds are more forward thinking, because they definitely have their own issues and their own. It's definitely a theme in my story. When some of the Earthlings leave the planet to go train on these other worlds, they're actually faced with a bit of bigotry, and because they do look at us as uncivilized. Part of it is we're not all united like these other worlds are. We're fighting amongst ourselves, things like that. In that sense, yes, very much less forward thinking than these other worlds would be. But they also still have their bad people that are selfish and greedy and corrupt. And that's all very much a theme of my story, of just kind of human nature. How can we overcome things like this? Are we ever going to overcome things like this? I don't know. It's, you can try and lay blueprints to do it, I think, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's up to each and every person to
Oh yeah,
just
100%.
try and be a good person.
Yeah, well, we can try.
Yep. But yeah,
What?
that's and I think a lot of this boils down to discussions like that. Even they boil down to it's a major theme in my book of my characters are more
Mhm.
standard, the good guys. It's a good versus bad story, but at
Yeah.
the same time, he's faced with the idea of it's even put forward to him in the book. Well, if it, he, I'm trying to say this without spoiling anything, but it's like what's more important to a single person? If a single person if at the same time they can choose one of two options, save their family or save the whole world,
Mhm.
what's those dilemmas like that, I think, are what cause a lot of the divide in society is
Yeah.
people are okay with certain things so long as it doesn't affect them personally or their family. And that's where a theme of my story is definitely that's a starting point, I think, of where
Mhm.
we all need to look of trying to put everyone on that equal ground as their family. No one should ever look past their family
Yeah.
for others, but we got to find that equal ground of we can't also just look aside from other people just because they're different.
Yeah. That's very interesting. So when you talk about the themes of your books, as you're writing your another part of your process, do you have the same themes running throughout the whole series in your brain? Obviously, the whole series is not complete yet. Completely understand that. Or is it kind of broken up and you're tackling different themes throughout the different books?
I think on a smaller scale, there might be some smaller themes that are going to be
Mhm.
spread differently throughout each book, but
Yeah.
it's definitely just the main theme throughout all my books of kind of what I was just discussing of having power, using it appropriately, not letting it change you, understanding that if you are someone in a position of power, you you can use it just to either help those you care about or you can
Yeah.
use it to help everyone.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a struggle. There's going to be no easy way to figure that out because what helps everyone might not help you personally or those you love and care about. And so
Mhm.
that's definitely what I would say is one of the major themes of my story is figuring that all out. And that is something that especially my main protagonist kind of has to grow with and
Mhm.
learn to adapt to because, especially in the more recent one coming out, he almost he is a good guy, but he almost doesn't look at himself as a good guy. He's questioning everything he's done up to that point. And so that I would say is probably the major theme
Mhm.
of my story.
It's really interesting. So we have the new book coming out on May the 20th, which
Yeah.
you're very excited about, I'm sure. What
I,
has been, because I would say this is the dark element, yes. What has been the hardest thing? Maybe it was in the first book or maybe it's to date, but what has been the hardest thing for you personally to even just get to this point?
in any sense of publishing or just in a writing sense? The hardest thing is the marketing we talked about before.
And then in a writing sense?
In a writing sense, I think just there's been a lot. Definitely, definitely, just learning the process was tough. I'm not a good self editor. Um, I should rephrase that. I think line editor stuff like I think I'm very good on my own of doing developmental forming
Mm-hmm.
that. I've had to honestly, even working with editors, had to make in beta readers minimal changes to
Mm-hmm.
kind of the pacing and the actual arc my story goes. I feel like that is a strong point of mine. But when it comes to things like line editing and stuff like that, I get so caught up on some of it that
Mm-hmm.
I think I spend a lot more time than probably a lot of other authors do going through and even doing like a final reread. And that's after having worked with a line editor. I'm still getting caught up on sentences like, is this right? Does this flow exactly how
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of a perfectionist in that sense. And
Mm-hmm.
it's line edits like anything. I think syntax and prose is subjective, just like taste in books is subjective.
Yeah.
A lot of us talk differently. We have different ways of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can, in a way, the way your prose is written some might think it's fine while others don't think it's fine.
Yeah.
I definitely get caught up with that, and that is definitely the tougher thing to the toughest hurdle for me when I'm doing writing. With that said, I've
Hmm.
now formed a good system where I think I'm in the best position to
Yeah.
better my work, and I think it has shown as my work has progressed.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you think that having written now two main books, a novella and now your third main book, that it's just got maybe not necessarily easier, but just a little bit smoother in the process?
100%. My process for book 3 was by far the smoothest of any of my books. It still took me time because, as I said, those editing phases they really stumped me up. But no, it was by far, it was smoother. There wasn't I knew where I was going every step of the way. I knew what I had to do next. And I it just I did a live yesterday, and I was saying on there, I hate saying this because it makes it sound like my earlier books are bad, and I do not in any way think they're bad. I'm
Hmm.
obviously biased. I love my books. I think they're all great. But like reading through this last one, I almost wish this could be the first book, just so this could be the first taste everyone gets of my work, because
Yeah.
I just feel it is far and wide. I just feel it's at a different level. I feel this is, I think, when I wrote my other books, again, I still think they're great, but as authors, we're always questioning. We always get imposter syndrome. We're always questioning, is our work that good? Blah, blah, blah. This was the first one when I was reading through. I was really like, this should be on a bookshelf at Barnes and Noble. It should be at a bookshelf anywhere. It belongs with any of the trad books I've read in my life. Again, I'm biased. That's my personal
But
take.
that's
Other
such
people
an
might disagree.
amazing place to be as well, because we are each our own toughest critic, and to finally get to that point, and you're not even finished with the series yet, to be
Exactly.
at a point where you're like, I can actually see this being on a bookshelf. That's fantastic. I will say that I think a common thing for a lot of the indie authors, especially that I've spoken to, is that they feel the same. Like their first book is, to them it's still good because obviously it's theirs, but by the time they finish a series or they've got a few books in, by that point they're like, wow, my writing is so much better now, because you know how to streamline or
Oh
how to
yeah.
hit points better. And
You've
that's,
gotten more feedback. You've had more experience yourself.
yeah.
You've worked with more people who do this for a living. So
Yeah.
it's natural that it's just going to get better as you go.
Yeah.
And I think with series, I think a big part of it is it's not just that I'm a better writer. It is also I have been building towards certain events for my series. When you think
Yeah.
of most series, the books are better. Usually, those are the greatest series. The books keep getting better and better. And I think a part of that is because you're not bogged down with some of the necessities you may have in a first book of a series.
Yeah. Finding
That's
the world, getting to know the characters, getting
exactly.
into where you need the action to happen. I agree. I think the scary thing for me sometimes as a reader is that when the first book is a 5 stars, that terrifies me, because I'm like, so where can we go from here?
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree. And that's where it almost makes I just had a live recently, and someone was like, "Oh, do you wish you could go back?" And I don't really wish I could. Yes, now with the experience I have, maybe there's certain things in book 1 I could clean
Yeah.
up, maybe. But I wouldn't want to do that. I feel like part of my story, I feel like part of why I think it's so good is my characters and the story itself just matures with each book. And I think a part of that, yes, that was intentional. It's a very intentional theme of my story, but it's also part of that just grew. I grew with the writing, and I don't know, it just works for me. I think
Yeah.
I think that's what helps it feel like a better each one. And I think that's any really natural progression of even the most famous authors out there. I think it's
Yeah.
probably why I don't think they went in intentionally saying, okay, I'm going to write book 1 and make sure book 2 is this much better, book 3 is this much better. No, it's just when you're deeper into a story, when you become more involved with your characters, they sit
Mhm.
longer in your head. It's just going to feel more natural and feel better in that sense.
Yeah, because you as well have a better grasp on them
Hmm.
and what you want them to do, because
Exactly.
every character's got the arc that you want to do. But I do find it really interesting, like when you talk to some authors, I think quite a few of the ones that I've spoken to, when they talk about their characters, it's almost as if they are real people and
100%.
they've been with them for so long, and they've just, or it's a story that they've waited to write for so long. They've just been in their head. And I feel like those are the stories that come across almost better in a character point of view, because the writer isn't essentially writing as themselves. They're writing as whoever this main character is. And that gives the
Yeah.
reader more immersion, essentially, from my point of view anyways.
No, that's 100% the case. I mean, you know, my first book. So I always envision my series as a multiple POV perspective. I mean, it just I have my universe has 11 worlds that people live upon, and there's this whole there are 4 different factions and all that, and this universal war going on. It was never going to be able to be told from just one point of view.
Yeah.
With that said, my first book is building all of this up, and it's a heavy training novel, and because of that, it just made the most sense to stick to my main protagonist's point of view for the vast majority of the time, just because it was very important for me that the reader is learning all of this stuff and is in the mind of my main protagonist, I guess you could say, which I think worked very well. But with that said, that is where my next books are very different, book 2 and book 3, because now it opens up to more POVs. The character, a lot of people who are secondary characters in book 1 are now getting their time to shine in book 2 and 3, because everyone's splitting up. The story's just becoming wider. The arcs are taking off in different directions. And yeah, so it's just natural that now I'm much more in the mind space of these guys or guys and girls who were just secondary characters in book 1, who now have their own completely formed personalities. And again, that was purposeful, because I feel like that's what makes a good series. I feel like you're going to bog a book 1 down if you're trying to go in depth on who exactly every single character in the story is and is going to be all in book 1. Your characters need to grow just as much as your story needs to grow as the series progresses.
100%. Do you, obviously you've just referred to the book as multi-POV, is that your preferred way to read and or write, or are you a single POV kind of reader? How does that kind of play into how you write?
I like both. I go through phases, I think, of I guess I don't have a preference. For me, it's more about the story. If the story is if I like the idea of the story, I don't care if it's first person or third person, or multi POV or single POV. I think I've read more third person multi POV, and that's how I write my stories.
Okay.
With that said, I do have another story that I've begun in the past, and that I have, I probably have about half a book written worth of a first draft. And that one has been first person single POV story. So I don't think I have a preference per se, but I always envision the Power of the Stars series as kind of like one of these big epic fantasy series that I've read. And those are more so usually multiple PIV.
Yeah.
And in many instances, they're usually third person, at least the ones I've read too. So I think that's probably why I wrote it like that.
enough. I think multi-POV personally is my favorite way to read, because I like a well-rounded view of the world that we're in. And sometimes having a single POV, if you're I would say if you're very good at writing single POV, that effect can still happen. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it feels as though you're literally just in one place, and I find that things will happen. You're like, why has that happened?
Yeah.
Why are we behaving like this? Because you don't have the full picture, and that's just my preference.
Yeah. No, and that's completely understandable. I get that 100%. I think that's why like single POVs work better in things like urban fantasies and stuff like that, where it's a more straightforward. Many times it's a little more of an action-driven story, because it's not this grand scope of a story, or those a lot of times are a grand scope of a story, but they're also 15-book series. So you're able
to get more time to learn everything.
Exactly. Whereas, trilogies, or in my case, a 5-book series, you're never going to get the full scope of everything I want to get unless it's multiple POVs.
Yeah. I recently read a book where I was in one person's head the whole time. And although it was great, I really enjoyed it, there have been comments made, and I completely understand them, where they're like, well, there's no world building. I'm like, but you're only following one person. So where
Yeah.
one person is, that's what you're getting, because
Yeah.
there is no grander scope. Whereas I think that's why I prefer the multi, because you could literally be in different worlds, in different parts of the same country, and you are getting a better understanding of the world and how the world works itself.
Yeah, I think if you read single POV books, you should just go in with the understanding that it's not going to have the in-depth world building that most do. I mean, look at Red Rising, that just follows Darrow in book one. There's barely no world building. It's
just
almost,
what he's experienced and how he's coping with everything he's coping with. Which
exactly, but you get the world building more so in book two and book three, but yeah, you don't get this full in-depth world building of that series really ever, and that's just how it's going to be in those single. I mean, I guess you get them in the back half, which is he changed into a multi POV story, but yeah, I think that's just something you should expect when you go into books that are written.
Yeah. And then flipping on that a little bit, you've obviously mentioned that this book, The Forsaken Planet, is the one that we will talk about because it's out, it's first, it's published. With the 50-50 being sci-fi and fantasy, how did you come up with the fantasy element of like your magic system? Is that something that's always been bubbling in the back of your head, or was there something specific that inspired it?
I would say probably the inspiration was just how I really loved reading epic fantasies, and a big part of why I love that when I still read them, but why I loved it when I first got into it was because of the magic systems.
Yeah.
And I kind of always looked at it. I think I might have said this earlier, but I always kind of looked at it as these magical worlds. Maybe they're out there in the stars somewhere. We don't know what's going on out there. We don't know if there's planets out there where there are species or maybe people who can wield some sort of power. And so I think that was just kind of the inspiration of, I wanted to blend epic fantasy into a space story. And that was kind of the way I thought to do it, was to, and then we have mysteries on our own planet of, there's all these ancient lores of gods and whatnot, are saying people using these immense powers. It was just kind of what I thought was a cool idea to maybe give, like I said earlier, a fictional recount of all this and why that is and how it works. And so, that was just my goal going into it. And then when I started writing it, it kind of took on a life of its own, because as I wrote more, I kind of started realizing, well, if everyone was able, I liken the magic system sometimes to the Force from Star Wars, except everyone can use it. And if you're on a planet where everyone can use a power like that, they're going to be very different from us. They're not going to, like I said, the technology is going to run very differently. Their combat is going to be run very differently. And that was by far the biggest. It's part of what took probably so long with book one, was establishing a system that made sense, had its own rules, and it made sense to a power that could have everyone. I have a scene in book one where the people from Earth are still trying to learn how to use the power, and part of what a technique to get them to use it is to kind of mesh with little kids who are from these worlds and are trying to learn it themselves, but they can grasp it because they've always been able to their whole lives. They know how to. It's like a cute little scene in the book, but I just feel like it made sense towards that they're seeing these kids who can't really control it, but they're seeing them know how to grasp it. I just felt like that would make more sense into bleeding into someone who's never known about it, never been able to even touch it. They still can't touch it. They're trying to, they're learning about it. And it was just little things like that. I tried to bleed into my story to make it a little realistic, that any normal schmo like me from Earth could go out there and learn this power, and not just learn it, but become adept with it.
Okay. That's okay. Now I kind of wish that it was real. You just go and learn.
One of the biggest, most common DMs I get from people who read my story is, I'd like to be able to have Solera now, stuff like that, because it would make life a lot easier. That's for sure. And that's the theme of the story, is they're able to do so much more with their powers, that they're not necessarily forced to slave away at a job all day long and do things like that. And it's my character says in the beginning of book 1, he's like, it sounds like a dream world, So
it does. It really, really does.
yeah, and that's all stuff that I just thought was cool, was interesting.
Yeah.
I was able to relate it to kind of mysteries of our past, and I just enjoyed doing it. I spoke earlier about how big theme of my story is kind of the mysteries of space. What's our purpose? What's the soul's purpose? Stuff like that. And that's all stuff I was able to connect together. Like what we're talking about is, it eases, they talk about it eases stress on them. They don't have to do all these things. It's much more carefree lifestyle, and which is like, and that's again why they kind of look at the Earthlings as forsaken, is because to them, they're living how humans are supposed to live.
Yeah.
And that's part of the lore, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that's what will appeal to a lot of readers is we all love to read to get away from the stresses of everyday life, right? So what better way than to dive into something like this that's just feeding that directly?
Well, exactly. What way to wish that we could shoot ourselves into space and meet another race than what your booking like encapsulates. That's so cool. Okay, so with the next book coming out very, very soon, we're T-minus 7 days away.
Yeah, week from today. Yep.
What is something or many things, however many, that you are very excited about for the next book in the series? This could be a twist that you can't tell us about because obviously that's spoilers, but like a twist that is going to come that will spark readers to have a conversation, or just in general something that you're really excited about for your newest release.
There's a lot of things that all I guess could be wrapped up into one. I'm just excited. As I said earlier, I think this is by far my best book, so I'm excited for readers to take it in that sense. There's also just been so many story arcs, different characters. There's a lot of things that happened in book 1 and book 2, which may not have made sense per se 100% to people when reading at the time. And that is all stuff that kind of comes to a head in book 3. I think there's events of book 1 and 2 that are going to make a lot more sense now that book 3 is, once people read book 3. And then, there's just certain things I've been wanting to do with this series for a long time, even before I published book 1, that I was finally able to do in this. I was just saying before about how like one of my toughest battles was building my magic system, making it consistent and making it ingrained to my universe, to make sense to my universe. And when I was doing all that, I was getting these great ideas of how is this going to work? The battle is so different because of this system. How is this going to work on a space war, a war that involves starships and warships in space? And how are fights on the ground going to take place when it involves a whole planet, when they're able to use these powers and with this advanced technology? How am I going to mesh all this? Because my fight scenes also involve handheld weapons, just because it's kind of like Star Wars, where if you can use powers like that, having a gun or a projectile isn't going to do anything to anyone, because they can just stop it cold, which is displayed and shown in the very early segments of book 1. And so, it was just, I was very excited to make this massive scale war scenes, because don't get me wrong, the war starts in the earlier books and you see a lot of combat and a lot of fighting, but you don't see that full. You don't see, almost like Red Rising, like the rain when they're dropping on a planet. You don't get that full scale planet attack like that until book 3. And I was just so excited to write that. And you get a lot of that in this book. And that's one of the other aspects. I'm definitely more excited to see what readers think of it all too, because it also comes from the point of view of someone people probably didn't expect to become a more so prominent character in the series. So I'm just that if I'm nitpicking smaller segments, that's one of them that I'm really excited for. But overall, I'm just excited to get this one out there, because it's finally where I wanted the story to go. I feel like it's reached that point that I've been aching to get to for so long.
But if anyone is watching this and you've never read one of Bryan's books, I think just the passion and the energy that you talk about your newest release should be enough to convince anybody to pick up your books, because that was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, no, listen, that's how I was able to get. This is my fourth book I'm going to be publishing in 2 years, and I'm not a major scale author. They're not selling by the dozens. That's daily by the dozens, I should say. I've sold more than a dozen books. I do well for indie standards, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just been passion getting me through and getting it out there. Like I've had this story in my head for so long, especially as I said, when people started enjoying it after book one, I said, okay, I got to get to where I know I want this to go, because I know people who love book one are just going to keep, the vast majority are just going to keep loving this series more and more, because I love the ideas that are in my head more and more. And that's luckily been the case for me.
Yeah. And that, I think, is what keeps readers coming back, especially for indie authors. It's the passion and the dedication that you guys have to your books and your series and your craft as well, I suppose, just like constantly learning and evolving. Obviously traditional authors have that as well, but with how much stuff you guys do personally is just creating that link with readers as well, which obviously,
for sure,
great books keep people reading, but great people also keep readers coming back, because they
100%.
They, I'm struggling to think of the word, but they like link with you essentially, because they and then they spread it out there as well, which I think is a lovely thing and an amazing thing about the indie community, is that with the support that a lot of people will give and share, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's definitely what my love for indie is just, I think you just get the more heart, you get the more passion in indie books. That's not to say authors in trad don't have that, but I think there's so many more hands in the pot of their books. They're working with a team of editors, they're working with an agent, they're working with a publishing house who they have a say in where they want the story to go. Whereas us, it's coming fully from our heart. It's coming. It's basically from our brain to yours. And I think that bleeds through a little bit more nowadays in the indie sphere, as opposed to trad, where it's more check the boxes off of the checklist to make sure we're going to hit TikTok's algorithm and stuff like that. So,
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't personally use this video as any hints or tips to hit the TikTok algorithm. I have no idea what goes on over
there. I couldn't tell you.
Oh, amazing. So it has been an hour. Thank you so much for spending so much time with me and taking time out of your, I'm sure, very busy day to talk about all things you and your book.
Thank you for having me.
Before we sign off, do you just want to quickly plug like where we can find you? Obviously Instagram, but all of that. And I will post live, include the link to your website into the description as well, for people who want to come and find your newsletter and download the novella.
Perfect. Thank you. You can find me. My website's bryanwilsonauthor.com. That will give you the links to all my socials on it. If anyone wishes to follow, I'm on the 4 main ones. I'm on are really 3 main ones: Instagram, X, and TikTok. I'm trying TikTok. I don't know, in a month that might change, just because I'm not getting very far, but I'm trying TikTok. I'm also on Threads, but not very active. I'm also on Facebook, but not very active on there. And yeah, that's it. My books are all available on Amazon. They are free for Kindle Unlimited subscribers. And I think that's about it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me and to have a lovely little chat. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's blast. I appreciate you having me on here.
No problem, anytime. So yeah, like I said, the link in the description will link to Bryan's website. You can find all of his information over there. And I will be live again tomorrow on here for my It's All About Fantasy read along book club, if you wish to come and join me over there to talk about all things Rob J. Hayes' series Along the Razor's Edge. But otherwise, thank you so much, Bryan, once again for joining me. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, because you have so much left of your day.
Good daylight over here.
Otherwise, I will see you all next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.